Welcome to the PFF Wire podcast. I'm Doug Kyed, joined as always by Brad Spielberger. Brad, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great. Internet is strong as ever over here. Hopefully it'll last the whole show.
We'll see about that. Let's get into some of the biggest news of the day. We will go through the news, rumors, everything around the NFL. First off, Jonathan Taylor out Thursday night against the Denver Broncos on Thursday Night Football. Little bit unexpected just because I know that Jonathan Taylor wanted to play in this game. I think he even went as far as to say on Tuesday that he expected to play. The Colts did not believe that playing Jonathan Taylor would further injure his mild ankle sprain, which is how it's been described to me. But I also know that some people around Jonathan Taylor weren't very excited about him potentially playing on 4 days rest after a Sunday game and with 10 days rest on the horizon. So now he does get to rest that ankle for 2 weeks, and Nyheim Hines will take on a bigger role in that Colts backfield.
Yeah, it also sounds like some reports that Philip Lindsay could be elevated from the practice squad, kind of a more pure downfield runner. Nyheim Hines, obviously a bit of a gadget guy, a good receiver, returner, stuff like that. So, yeah, Taylor, it's pretty interesting. Apparently has not missed a game since high school, never missed a practice at Wisconsin, had not missed a practice until this week for the Colts. Interestingly, though, he had his worst game grade ever at PFF in the NFL last week, a 45.7 when he had 20 carries for 42 yards and a fumble. Obviously, he's an all-world player, number one overall pick in fantasy, so people are scrambling across the country, and a big loss for the Colts in a, not a must-win, but maybe a must-win on Thursday.
I will say from a fantasy perspective, this coming on a Thursday night game at least allows people to prepare. If this had come down to the wire on Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, then this would have been much more difficult to prepare for. I do think that Nyheim Hines is an interesting fantasy play just because he is so involved out of the backfield. And if he does start to get more early down work as well, then I certainly could have a big game. That being said, Broncos defense is pretty tough, so maybe not the best matchup for Nyheim Hines in this game. Speaking of a player who has not missed a lot of time over the course of his career, Mac Jones was back at practice today. We do not have the Patriots injury report yet. He missed last week's game with his high ankle sprain. He said before that game that he had never missed a game with injury. I mean, maybe you could go back to like Pee Wee days or Pop Warner or whatever it is, but it sounds like he didn't miss any games in high school or college. But now it seems like he is pushing to play after just 1 week off with that high ankle sprain. He did appear to be moving a little bit better. There were clips of him throwing the ball to new quarterback Garrett Gilbert, but I mean, that would be massive for the Patriots to even play Mac Jones on a bum ankle over the prospect of Bailey Zappi starting that game against the Detroit Lions on Sunday, because Brian Hoyer was not at practice as he continues to go through concussion protocol.
Yeah, it would be a massive upgrade for them against the Detroit Lions defense that is dead last in EPA per play allowed, a very exploitable defense. And Jones is not grading particularly well for us, actually 30th in PFF passing grade with a 58.8, but fourth right now in big time throw rate. He has made a lot of big time throws. Especially even in that game where he got hurt, he was, some interceptions, but also some big time throws down the field. Getting him back would be massive because this is a winnable game. They're still favored in this game. And I think it's found it interesting. They actually opened -2.5. And before we know the deal with Mac Jones are now -3 on that key number. So maybe there's some optimism around the team. Folks think he can play, can get back in time. I did see those videos though. His left foot, his planting foot when he throws, he could barely even get it off the ground. So yeah. I think there's some progress to be made.
Yeah, absolutely some progress to be made. One more note on Jonathan Taylor. He was dealing with turf toe in that game last week also against Tennessee Titans. So I think that also explains that poor performance and gives some context into why it's probably best to rest him in this game now with turf toe and an ankle sprain. But yeah, I mean, my perspective on this Patriots-Lions game is that Lions defense, as you mentioned, very easy to exploit. One of the worst defenses through 4 games of all time right now. They're the first team to score and allow a combined 281 points and have a losing record. So that tells you enough. Their offense is doing really well. Defense is allowing more points than the offense is scoring. I'm not sure if the Patriots can exploit that defense with Bailey Zappi. I think that they can on the ground with Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris, but you've really got to keep up with that Lions offense. They're still missing some pieces in practice. Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark, DeAndre Swift, all these guys still dealing with injuries. But even without those guys, the Lions offense was still really productive. I think that, those downfield throws that Mac Jones can make, that would allow, I think, the Patriots to keep up with this Detroit Lions offense. Bailey Zappi, I don't know if they'll even trust him with a full week to prepare. You might see a game plan, maybe not similar to what we saw with, Mac Jones last year against the Buffalo Bills in the weather, or Jacoby Brissett back in 2016 when he was starting with a pretty severe injury. I forgot exactly what it was. But I think that they would really limit Bailey Zappi if he does wind up starting this game.
No doubt about it. And like you said, they're only bad if you can exploit it and take advantage of it. Obviously, the Patriots have a lot of different weapons. They've been getting into the offense. Not going to play this weekend, but Tyquan Thornton, their second round wide receiver, did open his window to return today as well. So that they're getting healthy in some areas. But yeah, I think you nailed it. Where it doesn't just make the defense doesn't just make Bailey Zappi a competent, quality NFL quarterback. You need to be able to exploit them with explosive plays, downfield passing, and they did not really let him do that much in last week's game.
Yeah, they definitely didn't. I think that the Patriots were impressed by Bailey Zappi with his ability to come in the game, with no notice to play as well as he did, take the Packers into overtime. But one of the things I heard is that he was just kind of gripping that ball a little bit too tightly, holding it a little bit too long in pretty much every single situation. Obviously, some of those nerves would go away if he gets to actually prepare for this game as a starter, but certainly better to have Mac Jones. Speaking of that Thursday night game between the Colts and the Broncos, Russell Wilson, good to go in that game. Obviously, the Broncos will be without Javonte Williams, however, since he has multiple ligament damage in his knee, ACL, I think LCL as well. This Broncos running back situation, I know we touched on it a little bit on Monday's show, but it might be a little bit of a mess until we figure out everything that's going on here, because obviously they do still have Melvin Gordon. He's had fumble issues. He's banged up. They've got Mike Boone, who was kind of that proposed backup behind Melvin Gordon. But now they signed Latavius Murray off the Saints practice squad as well. So that whole situation gets muddied a little bit. I'm curious to see who actually emerges as that early down ball carrier. But also, Russell Wilson was really relying on Javonte Williams as a pass catcher out of the backfield. Who steps up in that role as well?
No, 100%. It's going to be a fascinating situation. I do not think it's as simple as Melvin Gordon just becomes the top guy. Murray's not a random signing, too. GM George Payton was the assistant GM in Minnesota when Murray was with the Vikings, and he had a great game for the New Orleans Saints against those Minnesota Vikings. Over 5 yards per carry, 2 explosive rushes, a forced missed tackle, and an 83.3 rushing grade in that game with Alvin Kamara not playing. So, he's looked good. I think, like you said, maybe he's more of the early down guy. Maybe Gordon kind of keeps that red zone, third down package the way he's been utilized. But I agree, there should not be any high level of confidence in how they're going to deploy these guys, especially with Gordon dealing with a neck injury. He has played through it, dealt with it last week too. But whenever you read neck in the injury report, I think you pause a little bit.
Definitely. There's some wide receiver news today. Cole Beasley retired immediately from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's a statement from his agents that Cole Beasley wants to spend more time with his wife and children. This Buccaneers wide receiver situation, I'm not sure how big of a role Cole Beasley was going to play moving forward, but he was good depth to have either on the roster or on the practice squad. Now, clearly they still do have Mike Evans. They've got Chris Godwin, Julio Jones, Russell Gage. But I'm just kind of curious to see if they now go out and try to find someone else to serve as that valuable depth there, because unfortunately, at this point, you really can't rely on Julio Jones. Chris Godwin still returning from an injury. Russell Gage hasn't performed quite as well as I expected him to. But one name that was thrown out as a possibility for the Buccaneers, this isn't like any solid information or anything like that, but someone said, wonder if they try to sign Odell Beckham Jr. I know that people are kind of thinking that might come down to the Los Angeles Rams, New York Giants, but I don't know. Odell Beckham Jr. has always had a high regard for Tom Brady through the years. So if that wide receiver situation did get shaky again, there's always a pretty good option out there in Odell Beckham Jr.
And I think the Buccaneers have shown that maybe it's not Brady's last year. Maybe that has changed now. But I think they've shown that they're willing to just pour as many resources as possible into this team, bring in a guy like a Julio Jones, Akeem Hicks, like any veteran that's quality and available, they're going to talk to. And yeah, Beckham is doing his kind of countrywide tour and getting every fan base riled up when he visits the building, whether it's for football reasons or personal reasons. Sounds like it was a mix of both in New York. But yeah, I think they will explore it. I think maybe try to sell Odell on, hey, this could be your last opportunity to play with this guy. And he has an interest in playing with you as well. But yeah, I mean, as ineffective as Beasley was, he still had 4 catches in 2 games right after getting signed. Like he was playing snaps. He was being utilized. So they clearly think they still need some help, and maybe they want more of kind of a shifty slot guy, and they have a lot of outside burners. Obviously, Godwin does play a lot in the slot. Gage can play there, but not like an early in the shot clock separator, which Cole Beasley is. And Odell is not only that, but he certainly is that in some respect for sure.
Definitely. And, there's always the possibility that Tom Brady could convince his old friend Rob Gronkowski to return out of retirement as well. I don't know. That offense just seems like it needs a fix somewhere. And they've got a ton of wide receivers, but it still feels like there's something there that they kind of need. Let's get into some of the players returning off of the PUP list, off of injured reserve. Let's talk about a guy that we're both pretty familiar with, Nikhil Harry. His clock started coming off of his own high ankle sprain. I believe that he did have that tightrope surgery on his ankle. So you'd think with the timeline on recovery from that tightrope surgery that he should be relatively close, but I think that they were saying that he would be participating in individual drills, maybe not working up to team drills quite yet. So maybe we don't see him this weekend or anything like that. But I mean, I know that Nikhil Harry was not good with the New England Patriots over the first 3 years of his NFL career, but you don't really need to be good to work your way into the Bears wide receiver core right now.
You most certainly do not. And I think, not this week, but I think he plays next week. You mentioned the timeline with the surgery. I mean, he wasn't necessarily a guaranteed to even make the roster. And I think the tightrope, getting that done, which, brings you back faster, I think is a big part of it. So I don't foresee how he would then, kind of sit out until like week 7, week 8. I think it's because he's going to play in the near future. And they need him, even just as a run blocker. Byron Pringle is now on injured reserve for them as well. He was blocking very well in the run game, not really catching many balls, but there's still value in that they are a run first team, and they've done well in the run game. So they need him back. They certainly need him back, and it's good to see his window was activated.
Definitely. One of the better blocking wide receivers in the NFL, not necessarily what you're looking for, the 32nd overall pick, but he can get some new life in his career, and maybe he can help out Justin Fields and that run game in Chicago when he's back. All right, let's take a quick break here. PFF Wire is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family. Brad, you planning to start a new family? Who knows? Wondering how to make your money grow? Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to understand needs and address goals with a game plan built for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. Almost got through that whole ad read without messing up. Right at the very end, I had to butcher that a little bit, but make sure to go to westernsouthern.com/PFF. Who are any other notable names that you've been monitoring that timelines have started coming off of injured reserve or of the PUP list, or they've returned to practice at this point?
Yeah, so Browns cornerback Greedy Williams is coming back, which is a pretty big deal. I mean, they do have a good secondary and a good defense so far, but he, second-round pick, good player. We also have Pittsburgh Steelers rookie wide receiver Calvin Austin as well, one of your favorites, the shifty wide receiver out of Memphis. I was surprised you forgot his name. He's one of your favorite guys. But yeah, so, some big names. And then I think the Jets, the biggest one maybe across the league is Dwayne Brown, their left tackle they signed just before the season, went right on IR. They are down to like their 5th and 6th tackle. They're playing against Miami, who is 5th in quarterback pressure so far this season. They don't have Tua Tagovailoa, but I still think the Jets need as much help as they can get in this big divisional AFC East game. Yeah,
curious to see what happens there with Dwayne Brown. He said that he didn't have surgery because he wanted to play this season. So I don't know. I feel like those offensive linemen maybe it's not easier to play through injuries playing the offensive line, because I'm sure it's not, but they seem more willing to play through injuries, and it doesn't affect them on the same level as, an ankle injury would affect a wide receiver, because you can't cut on it. You're not as fast. Obviously you have to be fast. You have to be explosive. You have to be strong as an offensive lineman. But I mean, Logan Mankins for the Patriots a few years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it was, played on a torn ACL for the whole season. So you can kind of see how well offensive linemen tend to play through injuries. So maybe Dwayne Brown tries to power that one out. We'll see how that goes throughout the week for him, but the Jets certainly could use him. They've started the season at 2-2. So they are right there in it with the rest of the NFL. Saints still dealing with some injuries. Alvin Kamara was back at practice. That's after the fact that he missed Sunday's game in London. But bad news is that Jameis Winston's still not practicing. Wide receiver Michael Thomas still not practicing. So could wind up being the Andy Dalton show again this Sunday. We'll just kind of have to see how this week progresses for Jameis Winston. I know that these shows on Wednesday are kind of tough because so much stuff is still up in the air, but the possibility exists that it could be Andy Dalton again.
Yeah, it's a big matchup for them. I mean, they're now 1-3, lost to the divisional Buccaneers and Panthers. They need to start winning some games. I mean, they obviously kind of not went all in, but they've kind of been all in for an extended period of time. And this, the whole purpose of that was to stay competitive, stay in this window. A 1-4 start, even in this bad NFC, your season's probably close to over at that point.
Yeah, they are playing the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle Seahawks are 2-2. That game is in New Orleans. So they're out of London, back at home. We'll see how all of that shakes out for Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, and the New Orleans Saints. I wrote a piece today, my weekly Rumor Roundup. One of the things I went pretty deep in on was the upcoming head coaching carousel. And I think that the one name that everyone's monitoring, obviously, is Matt Rule with the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers are 1-3 right now, obviously off to one of the worst starts in the NFL. And they have pretty much I don't know if it's a must-win game because it's going to be a tough matchup, but they're facing the San Francisco 49ers this week. 49ers are 2-2, and we saw how dangerous that defense could be against the Los Angeles Rams on Monday night. I mean, this seems like a really difficult matchup for a Panthers offense that is really laboring so far this season.
It could not be worse timing in any way, shape, or form. I mean, the 49ers lead our pass rush win rate, our pressure rate. Even without blitzing, they have a higher pressure rate than most teams do when they do blitz. I mean, they are a ridiculous front seven right now. And they also, talking about guys returning, safety Jimmy Ward and cornerback Jason Verrett, two very good players, have not even played for their defense yet. They both activated their window. Don't think they're going to play against Carolina, but are on the way back. So a ridiculous unit that is, probably going to terrorize this Carolina team. And I guess I would say you probably mentioned them in the article. I believe you did. I read it this morning, but Washington is kind of interesting to me as well. Not only head coach Ron Rivera, who I think kind of has some leeway, probably because he's also just trying to keep the perception of the entire organization afloat and bring legitimacy to the building, which I think he does. But not a head coach, but I struggle to see what Jack Del Rio, the defensive coordinator, is really bringing to the table. I mean, he's already causing you issues off the field, and the defense, which has spent a ton of draft capital and money, is bad. I don't understand what litmus test it would take for him to get fired because the defense is just simply not good enough.
Yeah, it's a tough situation with Ron Rivera, especially because he's essentially like the most powerful person on staff, essentially. Like, he's the one who makes a lot of the decisions. You've kind of heard that for a few years now, that he is that kind of top guy in the organization, obviously below Daniel Snyder, who's obviously dealing with his own issues and everything right now. So I don't know, it's tough to fire someone who, as you mentioned, brings some stability to that team. I would say on the defensive side, if they were to get rid of Jack Del Rio, there's not a obvious replacement on the staff for him. Obviously, I think Ron Rivera obviously would take on maybe a bigger role there, but yeah, it's tough to find that guy who would necessarily take over for Jack Del Rio. But yeah, I mean, the Washington Commanders coaching situation is certainly one to monitor. And I just wanted to keep an eye on for the rest of the season is the Los Angeles Chargers. I know that, Brandon Staley did a great job with them last year, but just among those guys who are in the second year, I think that things kind of have to get right for them this season. And certainly not saying that he should be on his way out or anything that's going to happen, but just kind of keep an eye on that team. As far as, the coordinators at this point who might be on the radar to become head coaches, I don't think we talked about on Monday because they hadn't played yet, but DeMeco Ryans, the 49ers defensive coordinator, Carolina Panthers can get a good look at him on Sunday when they play against one another. Jonathan Gannon, defensive coordinator on the Philadelphia Eagles, he was a hot candidate last year. Seems like he will probably be a hot candidate again this year. And, he was among the front runners for that Houston Texans job last year. Didn't wind up, getting it, taking it, whatever it was there. But I think that he'll be another hot candidate this year. And one kind of dark horse one is Miami Dolphins offensive coordinator Frank Smith. when Frank Smith was even mentioned to me, it's just such a kind of generic name that was like, oh yeah, Frank Smith. But he's done, obviously, all the credit goes to Mike McDaniel on that Miami Dolphins staff because he's the head coach. He's running the offense. But Frank Smith did a great job with Darren Waller as the Raiders tight ends coach from 2018 to 2020. Did a great job with Rashawn Slater last year as the Chargers offensive line coach and run game coordinator. And now the Dolphins have one of the most high-powered offenses in the NFL with Tua Tagovailoa running the show, who historically has not been the greatest quarterback.
Yeah, no, those are some interesting names. I also I haven't heard anything about this, but I think a name to keep an eye on is Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. He was also with the Los Angeles Chargers in Herbert's rookie year. Obviously got a lot out of him. He broke every record that rookies can break as a quarterback. And now Jalen Hurts is obviously playing the best football of his career. There were a lot, I tweeted this a couple weeks ago, and a lot of Chargers fans, there was a lot of kind of communication issues and some of the details weren't there, but I think that is what you learn with a couple of years as an OC. And I think that is coming along now. And I just think it's undeniable. If they play at this level with a very easy schedule, they probably could. He'll at least get some interviews, I would imagine.
Yeah, certainly a name to monitor there. One other thing that I was kind of talking to some people around the league about, and this is far off. Obviously, a lot of these things that we're talking about are, but it's interesting to us. I'm sure it's interesting to people who watch us as well and listen to us. And that's the Cooper Rush impending free agency situation, because Cooper Rush is now 4-0 as a starting quarterback. If you go back a few years, Teddy Bridgewater spent years as a backup before taking over for Drew Brees with the New Orleans Saints in 2019. He went 5-0 as a starter, and then he signed a 3-year, $60 million contract with the Carolina Panthers. Not necessarily saying that that's going to happen with Cooper Rush, but that tells you how teams view guys who are smart, take care of the ball, and win games. And so far, Cooper Rush not grading exceptionally well for us. He's 24th out of 33 qualified quarterbacks with a 63.6 PFF grade, but he's winning games. He's taking care of the football. And the Cowboys essentially will have to decide after this season, do we pay Cooper Rush top dollar as a backup quarterback in case Dak Prescott keeps getting injured, or do we let him walk and potentially get a compensatory pick for him? He's got a lot of competition. We've mentioned it before, all of the quarterbacks who are going to be free agents this year and how he stacks up in that group with Jimmy Garoppolo and Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold and everything else. But if he keeps winning games, I certainly would not be surprised if a team gave him a chance as one of those fringe starters next year.
Yeah, at the very least, like you said, make him such a highly paid backup that there's a implication he might play maybe at a team that, they don't believe in their quarterback fully. I mean, yeah, you mentioned you guys like Case Keenum coming off of one good year in Minnesota, signs a 2-year, $40 million deal with the Denver Broncos when they were busy just throwing money at every 6'3" and taller guy they could find. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned his grade's not great. On play action, he's the highest graded passer we have. It is known to be kind of a safety valve and an easy thing for quarterbacks to do, but you still got to do it. And he's been doing it at a high level.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of teams out there who could potentially need quarterbacks next year. Obviously, the Carolina Panthers, we talked about them quite a bit. But the San Francisco 49ers could use a backup quarterback behind Trey Lance. And Cooper Rush is a guy who, if you sign him, you aren't necessarily signing him to be a starter. I think that he could be valuable depth behind a guy like Trey Lance. But the New York Giants, there's some questions about Daniel Jones right now, Seattle Seahawks. That's one other thing is that, I mean, Geno Smith is a free agent after this year. Geno Smith is currently our highest graded quarterback in the NFL. If he keeps playing like this, I mean, it might be smart at some point to have extension talks with him, right?
That's actually a great point. You almost want him to get it done as early as possible. They're not a team like Atlanta or Carolina that took a quarterback, Tennessee that took that rookie and kind of has that leverage in their back pocket. Drew Lock is not leveraged. So yeah, maybe if you are a believer now, you try to at least start those conversations, maybe try to anchor towards a lower number because he's raising his stock every single game.
One final thing from the article that I wrote this week, the Rumor Roundup, is the quarterback prospect situation right now between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. They're kind of neck and neck right now for the 1-2 spots among quarterbacks, and they're different players. I mean, CJ Stroud is the bigger, more pocket passer, stronger arm, everything like that. Bryce Young, quite a bit smaller. I think he's listed at like 6 feet, 190, 200, something like that pounds, but obviously much more mobile. He's also dealing with a shoulder injury now, which we'll see what happens this weekend for them, how much that lingers. But the bubbling thing under the surface, and I don't think this is fair. I'm just going to preface this statement by saying this, but this is something that scouts sometimes talk about. Alabama quarterbacks over the last 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is, maybe not 15, but 10 years, have had success in the NFL. You see Mac Jones become an immediate starter. You see Jalen Hurts right now. You see Tua Tagovailoa having success. Ohio State quarterbacks have not had that same level of success over the last 15, 20 years when you go back to Cardale Jones. And, right now with Justin Fields not performing the way that he is, that could, if a team is deciding between those two quarterbacks, once again, not saying this is fair, but I think that would be a conversation that comes up, is saying Ohio State quarterbacks haven't been great and Alabama quarterbacks have.
Yeah, I do think it's generally a silly narrative. Obviously, I think you agree with that. And yes. Before Patrick Mahomes, there was never a good Texas Tech quarterback. Is there a good Wyoming quarterback before Josh Allen? I think you could obviously poke holes in it. But I will say on the Ohio State point, and we have people in our company who feel this. I mean, the offense they run, a lot of mesh concepts, a lot of just getting receivers wide open. They also have one of the best streaks of wide receiver talent, I think, in the history of college football right now. So that obviously helps as well. I think that to a degree, if it's the same offense, and so it's not even pointing to the school, you're pointing to the offense they're running. Maybe that's a little bit of a better argument. But all that said, I hear all of that. I decided, I think it's my favorite thing about QB evaluation. No one knows how to do it. If you think you do, you don't. So I'm planting my flag on Bryce Young. And what I look for now is, unless you are a physical freak specimen, which CJ Stroud arguably is, but unless you're that level, you watch Bryce Young sit in the pocket. He is so composed, so calm. That drive against Texas to win the football game, should have gotten sacked, somehow did not, escape the pressure. There are limitations physically, but I've just never seen a college quarterback so calm back there.
Yeah, definitely great pocket presence back there. You've also got Will Levis in the situation. He's not grading out very well for us right now. I think he's got like a 65, 69, something like that. Great. And then Anthony Richardson of Florida had 2 really tough games in a row, but he's also bounced back. I know that teams are kind of enamored with his talent. I think right now, probably looking more like a second or third round prospect, if that. But if he can continue to improve this season and bounce back the way that he has over the last couple of weeks, it's possible that he could enter that conversation in the first round as well. Let's talk real quick about that Thursday night game. We got Colts at Broncos. Broncos currently are favored by 3 points. The money line Broncos is at net minus 175, and then the point total is 42. Anything, spread, money line, or total that you're watching, or any props in this game?
Yeah, I think if I had to pick a side in this game, it would be Denver, which is crazy. I might be, that the old adage, doing the same thing and expecting different results means you're insane. I think that's me with the Denver Broncos, because I keep kind of believing they're going to turn the page and fix things. I think now the thing is, Indianapolis has played so poorly. It's a short week traveling to Denver to play in that altitude. No Shaquille Leonard at linebacker. Obviously, no Jonathan Taylor, as we talked about. Yeah. I don't like the bet, but if I gun to my head, I would go Broncos minus the field goal.
I'm trying to come up with compelling ways to argue with you about that, and I just can't. I think the one thing would just be Nathaniel Hackett. He's such a wild card right now that I don't know, what you can really predict. But yeah, I mean, not having Jonathan Taylor for that game, Matt Ryan has not been great. Michael Pittman's been banged up. I do like the Broncos in that game, and maybe, I don't know, the under is kind of calling my name, but PFF Green Line likes the over in that game. So I'm not sure if I'm going to go against PFF Green Line in that one. So never a good idea to go against PFF Green Line. One thing on Nathaniel Hackett before we go, I mean, I know we've talked about this before, maybe on or off mic, I forgot what it was, or maybe I've been having these conversations with other people, but I mean, the Waltons were not owners of the Broncos when he was hired. They also weren't owners of the Broncos when George Paton was hired. Certainly not saying anything's going to happen with George Paton, but I would say that I mean, among the head coach, the GM, and the quarterback, who's got the most power in that organization right now? It's probably the quarterback, right? It's probably Russell Wilson, given how much money they're paying him. And the fact that that did happen. Wait, no.
That was post. Yeah, no. New owners. Yep.
New ownership. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's a great point. I think he has the most power by a decent amount. Maybe George Payton on the same level. Yeah, Hackett is a distant third in terms of the power dynamic there. I do want to give him more time. I may have mentioned this on the show before, but I've spoken to former players of his that just laud his ability to teach. It can be a tough, a slow burn sometimes. But I think, give him some time and he could figure it out. This just came to my mind now that I'm thinking about it because it's Thursday Night Football. Folks, we're going to get Richard Sherman discussing a Russell Wilson game in Denver. That is going to be a treat. Make some popcorn before that one.
Absolutely. That will be very fun. One thing coming across the wire right now, you saw Rashad Bateman and J.K. Dobbins both not practice for the Baltimore Ravens. Justice Hill also not practicing. Marcus Peters resting today. So not a great situation injury-wise there for the Ravens, but it is still early in the week. I think that will do it for us for today's PFF Wire. Keep it on PFF.com for all of your news and analysis. Download the PFF app. Make sure to subscribe to PFF Plus. That's only $79.99 a year. You can get a free weekly trial. Make sure to follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyed. And we will be back with you guys again on Friday's show.